Shalom and welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk from Jerusalem. Today is the 18th day of the month of Shevat, 5777. It is February the 14th, 2017. And this week, Parashat Yitro, the Torah portion of the giving of the Torah, the Sinai Revelation. Winter weather has returned here to Jerusalem, and we're having some nice saturating rains. It's very cold, and there's a lot of water, which is a great blessing. However, that did not stop a small dedicated band of Jews, including myself, from visiting the Temple Mount just a couple of hours ago. And it was a great privilege to be there today. And I have to say, Yitzchak, you and I have been going together, but I didn't go with you today. Circumstances beyond our control. I have to report to you that there definitely does seem to be a change in the attitude of the police towards the Jews who are ascending. Mm-hmm. I have to say it, and I have to say it and mean it in a very positive way, that obviously it's not what we're waiting for, what we're hoping for, what we're aspiring to. There is still, the police still prohibits severely any attempt to pray, and they still film us, and they still treat us more or less along those lines. But there is an underlying change in their attitude that is translated, with a little bit more regard for the Jews, a little bit more respect, a little bit more humanity, and it's a tremendous pleasure to see. And what do you think? Is that because of the Minister of Public Security? Is it the new police commissioner? Is it just because of the sheer numbers? Is it because of the revolution that's taking place with the amazing amounts of Jews that are going up every month? I think you have a statistic from me here to pull out of your hat.
It was reported that the month of February, I think actually since the beginning of this year, the increase over last year and the number of Jews going to the Temple Mount each day has been 60%.
Wow.
Which is pretty significant.
And
of course, you always have to footnote that with the fact that the hours that Jews are allowed on are very, very limited, and the police, often will not let large groups up at once. But as the rabbis reported, things are changing in a positive direction, both because Muslim inciters and
that's another thing I wanted to report on.
Rioters in the Temple Mount have been
much
banned.
More calm than in the past. The Muslims that dog the steps of the Jews, the paid inciters, and the black-clad screaming women, and all those elements are not to be seen at the moment. So something's going on. As far as the hours are concerned, when people do go now, it's with tremendous dedication that they do it, because the hours are difficult. They're difficult for working people. They're difficult for family people. They're extremely limited to, during the winter months, 7:30 to 10, and 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then in the summer clock, it's in the morning, it's 7:30 to 11. We get an extra hour, and it's 1:30 to 2:30. But the point is, those are extremely difficult hours, whether early in the morning, which practically precludes someone from coming outside of Jerusalem far away, or in the middle of the workday. If the hours were normal hours like at any site, can you imagine how many hundreds of thousands of people would be streaming there?
Absolutely. I guess that's precisely why they're not.
In any event, I did my very best, as did everyone in our group, to pray, obviously in our hearts, and even as much as we were able to, with the police watching. And I got to tell you, it being the week of the Torah portion of Yitro, which begins in Exodus 18, I was thinking very deeply, as I was privileged to walk the hallowed ground of the Temple Mount and the environs of the sanctified courts of the temple. I was thinking about the fact that the Holy Temple experience is designed to be, shall I say, or it is explained to be through the eyes of our sages, a continuation of the experience of the Sinai Revelation. Mm-hmm. And elements of the Sinai Revelation are translated into everyday life in the Holy Temple. And of course, the center, the focal point, the apex of the Holy Temple is the Holy of Holies, and there dwells the Shekhinah, the Divine Presence. And in the Holy of Holies rests the Ark of the Covenant with the two Kruvim on top. And inside the Ark of the Covenant are the tablets of the law that Moshe brought down from Mount Sinai in this week's Torah portion. And so the idea is that in the heart of the Holy Temple, from there Torah is emanating to the whole world. And listen, there's a lot going on in Israel, there's a lot going on all over the world. And then, speaking of Israel and America, as we speak, Prime Minister Netanyahu is in Washington, and I believe the day of the big meeting with the President Trump is going to be tomorrow. Speculation abounds, and blah, blah, blah. The whole dynamic of the relationship with Israel and America hopefully is on a better footing than it has been the past 8 years, but questions still abound as well. And there's a lot of open questions, a lot of question marks floating in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what about the embassy? And why hasn't? Is it really going to move? And is that what Israel wants? And is that what America is going to deliver? And what about the whole cursed, obscene, pardon the expression, two-state solution canard? Is that going to continue to plague us? That whole threat, is that going to hover over our heads? That whole anti-God, anti-Torah, anti-Israel aspect of the destruction of Israel and the giving away of Israel's lands, and is that going to be pushed upon us? There's so many questions, but yet I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's so much uncertainty on the political level in terms of what Israel is facing and what Israel is being pressured to do, and the UN and the EU, and attitude towards the so-called illegal settlements, and how all of Israel, of course, is a settlement, and the whole idea of our inalienable right to build homes anywhere in the land of Israel. I'm thinking about all that, but then I'm thinking about Parashat Yitro, and I'm walking on the Temple Mount, and I'm thinking about this event that we're reading about. Can you turn that towards me? Because I have a problem over here once again, and I can't see that. Yeah, I just want to, can you put it where I can see it? Thanks. So I'm thinking about that event, which is basically the most earth-shattering, unparalleled game changer in human history, I think. It's safe to say. The giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, where God demonstrated his, what shall I say, existence, his love for humanity, to the extent that he so loved the world, listen to this, he so loved the world that he gave the world his Torah, so that the world would be able to be elevated and live a life of holiness and divine purpose. And the way that we read about that event and the way that we understand these verses, we understand we're talking about a tremendous level of prophecy. The whole concept that you and I like to talk about so much every year, the concept that we define as synesthesia, which means the ability, or how should we define it? The
mixing of the senses. You see you see sounds, and you hear images. Synesthesia,
wherein the borders of the senses are no longer present, and how it actually says that right here in chapter 20 and verse 15. The entire people saw the thunder and the flames, the sound of the shofar. It's much deeper than that. And in fact, God willing, in this week's video lesson on Parashat Yitro, we want to delve a little deeper into the nature of that experience and what it really meant for the people then, and what it means for us now as well, even more importantly. But, the whole concept here of the trajectory of Jewish history and world history, of Israel's slavery in Egypt, of the Exodus, of coming to the foot of Mount Sinai and receiving the Torah after everything that they had been through in Egypt and the splitting of the sea, and receiving the Torah now, this covenant, what are the implications for us today? What are the implications for the Netanyahu-Trump summit? What are the implications for the future of humanity? What are the implications for man's relationship with God? These are some of the things that we consider, that we should be thinking about when we think about the magnitude of what it means that God cut a covenant with Israel and gave us the Torah and the mitzvot. And let me explain to you exactly what I'm trying to say, if I can, by focusing on one particular concept, and that is an interesting idea when you think about it. Look at the Ten Commandments, right? The Ten Commandments, which are like the outline, as it were, or the concentration of the concept of what Torah is all about. Because, of course, at this event, God did not only give the Ten Commandments, but he gave the entire Torah, and that's why, as we will be learning about, Moshe stayed on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and he received all of the mitzvot, all of the explanation of the oral tradition of passing, that he would be passing down to Joshua, and Joshua to the next generation, and all throughout the activation of how all the commandments are going to be fulfilled. But you look at the Ten Commandments, the last one, what is the last of the Ten Commandments? Do not covet. Right? Do not covet. So there's a huge amount of debate, explanation, discussion, and then words of the sages about this commandment. Because basically it is a commandment on your thoughts.
Right.
It's like thought police. What is this, thought police? Like God is actually telling us a mitzvah, which is a limitation of what you may and may not think, and also an instruction to subdue feelings of your heart. And by the way, this is not that dissimilar to discussions that are held about the fact that Hashem also commands us, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. You shall fear God, etc. In other words, yes, the Torah does contain mitzvot, which are not action-oriented, but which have to do with our thoughts, with our emotions, with our internal mechanism, right? So that means that not only is our actions to be subservient to a spiritual and ethical discipline and calling, but also our thoughts and our very will are supposed to be subservient to Hashem. So this is an extremely far-reaching idea. And I think it is extremely important to understand this last mitzvah of the Ten Commandments, do not covet, which means basically that you are not allowed, it's a mitzvah, you're not allowed to desire something that belongs to someone else. Because it looks good, because it looks attractive, because I want it. I want that home, I want that field, I want that woman. No, you're supposed to say to yourself, I can't have that, it's not mine, and Hashem commands me not to have these feelings.
Right.
So what's interesting about it, and I think that this is probably one of the most important, powerful ideas for modern man to consider right now at this particular juncture in history, looking around at what we've done, at who we've become, at society. Basically, this is communicating the idea that it is within a person's ability to have control over, to discipline his desires, and that a person is indeed able to, expected in fact, to be able to train and aim his heart, his desires, and muzzle them and bring them into a place where that will give God the satisfaction, as it were, of what it is He's asking for man to achieve. This is the reason I say this is so important and I think explosive is because it blows open, the whole, thing that people are just so like, what do you want from me? This is who I am. Mm-hmm. This is how I feel. This is how I was born.
Follow your own ambition.
This is I can't change the way I am. And this, you may be thinking that I'm thinking of a particular endeavor or area of human nature or whatever it is. I might be thinking of that. I might be thinking of anything. This can be applied to so much of the whole convoluted and struggle of societal norms versus certain kind of values that might be considered old school, whatever, and just the whole corrupt, rift and just this whole, self-destructive mode that society has, which is basically it's self-gratification, it's instant gratification, it's hedonism. It's me, and all the watchwords of what it means to be in the selfie world. It's all about a selfie. Everything is a selfie. Everything is about me, and people become total slaves to their to everything that is the most base.
Slaves to their own desires. And,
yeah.
And what you're saying is what you referred to before, with a little humor, I guess, as thought police.
Right.
It's really liberating because the Torah is liberating us from the slavery to our own most base desires.
Exactly, and I'm saying it is so amazing that God is telling us here through this mitzvah and others like it, like love Hashem and fear Hashem, telling us that we are in charge. We are not just flotsam and jetsam buffeted about on like the sea of angst and existential crisis. We can take control of our lives, and we are commanded to control ourselves, and we're able to. The Torah would never expect us or command us to do something that is not within our reach.
Also, the Torah never commanded us to do something that would diminish ourselves, as in the idea that we have to shutter ourselves off from certain things in order to make our world smaller or narrower. The opposite. God created man, and God wants man to fulfill his potential. So God is saying, lose these, gain mastery of these desires, and they're the desires that actually limit your world.
As far as the potential is concerned, what this is teaching us is that we have the potential for tremendous greatness. We have the potential for spiritual mastery. We have the potential not to just be our own victims, but to actually be able to channel tremendous life force and to gain spiritually. We don't have to think anything that we don't want to think. We don't have to feel anything that we don't want to feel. If we strive for perfection, for holiness, for purity, for love, for the best things in life, we can master them. That's what Hashem is telling us here. Control yourself. Get a grip. Basically, lo tachmod, this last of the Ten Commandments, is basically saying, hey, get a grip. Now, the thing is, you said something else that was so important. People look at this whole trip of what they call being, and I'm doing the the quotation marks in the air, being religious. They look at it as such a downer. People say, oh, like you have all these laws and all these rules, and what kind of a life is that? And you're so primitive and all that kind of thing. But you said something so important. This is about being liberated, because I don't have to be a slave to this dark force inside of me that can force me into becoming the most loathsome animal. I can be higher. Hashem is telling me I can be higher. He has confidence and faith in me that I can be higher. And the thing is, open my heart in the deepest way. Please, especially those that denigrate, like a Torah lifestyle. We don't do these things because we have to. We do them because we want to. We do them because we can. We do them because this is what makes the difference between life and death. So you look at a person like, he's going to the synagogue 3 times a day, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing all of these mitzvot. A person who's loves Hashem and who's plugged into everything that we're saying here doesn't do the mitzvot out of a feeling of obligation, out of a feeling of rote, out of a feeling of a fear of punishment, out of a feeling of like, I have to do this now. No, he's doing it because now it's time. I can daven now. I can do this commandment now. I can fulfill Hashem's will now. Me in this world, I could strive for spiritual greatness. I want to do that. Not because I have to, because I want to. And that is the feeling that was so overwhelming at the Sinai Revelation, when all of Israel realized that we really have a covenant with God, and that is the direction that Israel has been going in ever since. So who cares what happens in Washington? Will they say the two-state solution word? Won't they? Is this one going to sell out? Is this one going to wimp out? Is this one going to stall? You know what? It's Parashat Yitro, and we're still seeing the sound of the shofar to this day. We're still standing there. It's perpetual. It's eternal. And that moment is a moment that lasts forever. And that's who Israel is. And you know what? Deep down in his heart, maybe not even that deep, maybe even it's right there on the top. He knows it. Netanyahu himself knows it because he is a Jew and he knows that this is who Israel is. So please stay with us. We'll be right back on Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk here in Jerusalem. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman. We are from the Temple Institute. Today is the 18th day of the month of Shvat, 5777, the 14th of February 2017. This week's Torah reading Parsha is Parashat Yitro, the Parsha, as we've been discussing, of the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. And before we continue, Rabbi, I know that you want to just mention again your speaking engagement schedule, which is coming up in 2 weeks.
That means that Yitzchak Reuven, you are going to be flying solo with Temple Talk for the next couple of weeks, because I am departing soon for a short trip to the United States of America. And we'll be speaking publicly in the South Plains Hebraic Center in Lubbock, Texas, at 1 p.m. on the 26th day of the month of February. That's Sunday, the first day of Rosh Chodesh Adar. On the evening of Tuesday, the 28th of February, the second day of the month of Adar, at 7 p.m., in Abilene, Texas, at 7 p.m. on the evening of Wednesday, the 3rd of Adar, the 1st of March, in San Angelo, Texas. And the details of those venues are available on our website, is that right?
On our website and also on Facebook, all the information plus contact information if you need more information.
That means that the next temple talk that we will do together. Actually, we'll do it, God willing, on Tuesday, the 7th of March, the 9th of Adar.
Wow.
Be a little tight, but we'll do it, God willing. That already is the week of Tanit Esther.
Whoa. Time's flying.
Time's flying.
So we have to move on here. Rabbi, so much more to say about Parashat Yitro, but before we get back to that, I wanted to mention that last Shabbat was also last Shabbat was also Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat, as we've been discussing, is a new year for trees, for many reasons. And in anticipation of Tu B'Shvat, the Temple Institute, along with some other organizations, did something which has become a tradition in the past few years, and that was a special seminar, afternoon, evening, of discussing temple-related commandments. And of course, we focused this past Thursday, in anticipation of Tu B'Shvat, we focused on the preparation of the showbread, the lechem hapanim, which was prepared in the Holy Temple. And we posted just yesterday some very beautiful photographs from this event, which have aroused a lot of interest on Facebook. And of course, the lechem hapanim, the showbread, was as a commandment that they be continuously resting on the table of the showbread, the golden table of the showbread in the sanctuary of the Holy Temple. And 12 loaves were baked each week, each Friday, by the Kohanim, the temple priests.
Right, one particular family of the Kohanim,
And
actually.
they were then, on the Shabbat, they were actually, in a very precise procedure, the
Because
old loaves were removed as the new loaves were put on the table, because it has to be there continually.
Right,
You can't
there's a
have a break.
commandment that the breads be constantly on the table. That means the table can never be empty. So there was actually an interesting procedure that the Kohanim employed in order to remove the last week's breads while replacing them simultaneously with the new breads. This is the mitzvah for them to be constantly displayed. Now, the description of the commandment for the building of the table we find in Parshat Truma, which we're going to be reading in several weeks. But the description of the commandment of the actual commandment to display the breads on the table is actually in the book of Leviticus, in Parshat Emor. Right. And there we read also about the frankincense that is to be placed on the table between the loaves. And here in the Temple Institute, we have made history today.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a very, very historic, exciting announcement that we can make in regards to the table of the showbread.
Today, the Temple Institute unveiled the 12 brand new specially shaped pans that are made of silver and gold-plated, as per Torah commandment. And these 12 trays, which we'll have soon, we'll have photographs of them up on our website and Facebook page. These 12 pans are in a special shape, which enable the specially shaped,
the unique shape of the loaves
bread
are protected
to maintain their shape throughout the week.
Again, on Shabbat, the fresh loaves are stacked in two columns directly onto the showbread table in these golden pans.
The old breads are removed and then eaten by the Kohanim in the Beit HaMoked, in the chamber of the hearth, a certain room inside that chamber where they would eat them. And as our sages tell us, those breads, even though they were 1 week old, remained hot and fresh, just as when they were first baked and out of the oven.
Those familiar with the Temple Institute's achievements and vessels that have been constructed for the Holy Temple know that we successfully designed and built the table of the showbread a number of years ago, but now we are adding these golden pans for the receiving of the breads on the table. And I want to point out something kind of interesting and I think rather moving, Yitzchak, which is, I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that at the Passover Seder, when we finish the Passover Seder, there are some songs that are sung at the end of the Seder. And at the very end of the Seder, we sing a paragraph, that the Passover Seder has ended. It's kind of like a prayer, and we say, just as we have merited to lesader oto, which means to set the Seder, the Passover Seder, in order, so may we merit to do it, meaning just as we have merited to conduct the Passover Seder, so we may merit to actually bring the Passover offering. But in Hebrew, ka'asher zechinu lesader oto, kein nizkeh la'asoto. But here, in our case, it's actually the opposite. We say ka'asher zechinu la'asoto, kein nizkeh l'sidur lechem hapanim b'mekomo. In other words, now that we have merited to actually create these pans, may we merit to actually set the loaves of showbread in these pans in their proper place in the Holy Temple, speedily in our days. Amen.
You mentioned, Rabbi, that the actual table of the showbread was created by the Temple Institute some 12 years ago, I think, maybe longer. And in that case, it was a very special group of people who gathered the money together and basically underwrit the entire...
Yes, a very small group of tremendously dedicated Torah students who single-handedly raised a huge amount of money to build the golden table of the showbread.
And just as with the golden table, with these 12 tavniot, these 12
pans,
gold-plated pans, we're offering the opportunity, if someone is interested, to dedicate those pans and to help underwrite the cost of the pans. If you're interested or would like more information about this, please contact us by email or a direct inquiry, perhaps on Facebook, and we will get back to you.
Okay. What else can you tell me about Parashat Yitro?
What else can I tell you about Parashat Yitro? Well, before we get back to Parashat Yitro, Rabbi, I'd like to also mention again our ongoing Mythbusters video series, which has been
I know that guy.
A great hit and very, very, very enthusiastically received. Again, it's we've put out 2 so far, Introduction, and the second one we put out a week ago, which is Falling from Heaven.
I gotta tell you, the next one in line is gonna just
knock your socks
knock
off.
the people out of their seats. It's gonna blow them out of the water.
And again, it's garnered a tremendous amount of attention, and a tremendous amount of attention from the Torah world, because it is basically, Rabbi, you lay it out there, right, for everybody to see the sources and why we're commanded, why it's clear that we're commanded to build the Holy Temple, and nobody's going to do it for us.
In case anybody actually was deluded enough to think that it was going to come down from heaven.
And there are those people.
Now, the next one in the series, this is not a spoiler, it's a teaser. I'll tell you what it's about. Also, it's going to be replete, just overstuffed with sources. The next one is going to be a consideration of the question, oft asked, who builds the third temple? Do we have to wait for the Messiah to build it, or is Israel supposed to build it?
I'm in suspense.
I think you'll find it, once again, highly entertaining, yet at the same time so informative.
And when are we hoping to have that one out?
I think probably after Purim. After Purim. Yes, after Purim.
Just after Purim.
After Purim.
Because we have more.
Because there's another one coming out very shortly after that one. This is so exciting.
So we're
What
in
a
the
great
midst of it.
series.
It's been described as revolutionary because these basic facts of halakha, of Torah law, basic facts of the commandments have never been presented in such a way to such a wide audience in modern times. And again, it's causing a bit of a stir and a lot of questions. We've been happy to answer many questions and welcome your questions concerning this video series. So, back to the Parsha, Rabbi. You were focusing on the 10th commandment. Of course, they're all great.
Right.
They're great. They're big.
Right.
Big commandments.
Right. They're so big.
They're so big.
I'm just thinking, though, that, I was just enthralled by the idea that people have no understanding of in general, which is that according to Torah, we are responsible for our thoughts, and we can control them. And not only our thoughts, but our desires. In other words, we are not in the passenger seat here. We're not supposed to be. We are supposed to be. And the Torah holds us up as really as potentially being so high, and considers us to be accountable for who we are. In other words, there are no excuses. That's the intriguing thing here. There are no excuses. It's not about how I was brought up or how I wasn't brought up. It's not about my anything. It's about who I want to be. I can be who and what I want to be is what the Torah is saying here.
When we base our decisions on aspiring toward the highest moral goal.
No wonder the sages say that a person who is truly free is a person who is a slave to the Torah, because it is liberating us from the shackles of our own negativity.
Basically gives us the keys to our own selves, and we become the drivers. And as you said, we're not in the passenger seat. And of course, the Parsha, and I can't not mention this, Rabbi, because this always moves me so much. The Parsha ends with the conclusion of the giving of the Torah and the speaking out loud of the 10 Commandments is, of course, an 11th commandment. And that is...
I know you like to define it as the 11th commandment, but I just want to tell you something before you continue. Open your heart in the deepest way.
Yes.
It could also be seen as the first commandment that the nation is given now. In other words, now, here was the revelation, here's the Torah, and now the first order of business.
The first order of business is build for me, God says, build for me a mizbeach, build for me an altar of earth. And on that altar of earth, you will make offerings. And basically, God is saying, we've agreed on the basic parameters of our relationship between God and Israel, and now it's time to make it happen, and time to really create a relationship, a two-way relationship. And God lowered his presence, as it were, onto Mount Sinai in order to be with the people of Israel. Now God is saying, raise your presence in order to be with me, and that's why you build an altar, a mizbeach, and that's why you perform these offerings. And of course, there's a whole world of trying to understand, the inner meaning of the offerings. And of course, we'll spend many weeks and months in the coming weeks of Temple Talk discussing this.
As we move towards the book of Leviticus, and who knows, maybe there'll even be a chapter of Mythbusters.
But again, just as God says in Exodus 25:8, build for me a mikdash, for me. He says here, build for me a mizbeach. And again, what could please a human being more than to do something that he knows or she knows is going to please God, because God said it would. I mean, to me, it's perfect. I mean, what more do you want in life? What could give you more pleasure?
The Prime Minister and the President that God doesn't want a two-state solution. Could you do that, please?
I will try to project that, yes.
Listen, speaking again of the connection between Sinai and the giving of the Torah and the Holy Temple experience, Today, just a little while ago, on the Temple Mount, we were standing opposite the place of the altar, speaking about the altar, speaking about where it stood and its dimensions and what it was all about. And I wanted to give a deeper level to the conversation, and I mentioned that which you and I have talked about many times, which you began to talk about now when you called it the 11th commandment. I called it the first commandment. You build for me an altar. How amazing that verse is. I'm talking, of course, about, if you want to know exactly, for our listeners, I'm talking about chapter 20 and from verse 21. How amazing the idea is that, again, put yourself in Israel's place. They're at Mount Sinai. The experience is incomparable, would be a silly way to describe it. The experience was transcendental, a silly way to describe it. The experience was just
out of this world. No,
out
that's
of
not
this
right
world.
either.
Out of this
But it was
world.
in this world.
Oh, Tozori, you just said it. You just gave it away. Exactly. It was out of this world, but Hashem is saying, wait a minute, but it was in this world. Beautiful. That's exactly the point. In other words, it was this high level of prophecy, and everything was. There was a total healing. There was a total healing of Adam eating from the tree of knowledge. It was healed. It was over with. It was a new beginning for mankind. They saw the sound of the shofar. It was this incredible thing. So the natural inclination that a person might have after all that is like, well, this is a very hard act to follow. Like, what am I going to do now? How am I, lowly me, going to serve this God in this world who has no end? How can I possibly translate everything I understand now into the reality of an everyday existence? What connection between God and this world? And God, knowing that, says, hey, you know what? You're wrong. This is the world that I love. This is where I want to be represented. This is where I want you to remember me. Like you just said, it's in this world. So make for me an altar of, this is what I like. You see this earth and these stones? Very, very artsy. Very earthy.
And as
right?
Rashi mentions, by earth, not because it also could be made alternatively out of stones, non-hewn stones, but Rashi mentions out of earth means connected to the earth. There's no disconnect here.
And the whole purpose of the Torah is for us to translate it into a language of action so that the physical world can be elevated. And this is extremely reminiscent in my mind. It reminds me very, very much of the famous Midrash that says that there are three things that when Hashem told them to Moshe, he recoiled. He fainted backwards in shock, and one was when Hashem said to Moshe, Exodus 25:8, and they shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. And he was like, how could they possibly make a sanctuary for you to be in this world? And referring to the tabernacle, God said, no, Moshe, you're mistaken. All they need is 20 beams on this side, 20 beams on that side, cover it this way, wooden beams, and I will come and rest my divine presence there. Meaning, I'm not asking for the moon. I'm not asking for more than you can do as people in this world. This is the world that I want. This is exactly as I want it. So it's very, very apropos conclusion to the portion of Yitro, because we should not think that this is not about this world. It's very, very much about this world.
Yes, this isn't like we all went to a movie and saw a great movie and now we're going to go back to real life. No, this is real life. This is the introduction to real life for the entire nation and for humanity.
Parshat Yitro is also the beginning of the concept of the judicial system in Israel and the Sanhedrin. And the whole character and who Yitro was is so out of this world, so amazing. And what an incredible honor that for him, that the Torah portion in which the Torah is given is named after him.
He was a great
man.
guy. He was a great guy, I got to tell you. A great philanthropist. But no, seriously, Yitro, who actually, he reappears in the Torah immediately after the appearance of Amalek, as almost as an antidote, as the correction for Amalek, who was such a blemish on the world, on the nations, and Yitro comes to rectify that, perhaps, and basically introduces. In fact, he and Moshe and Aaron and the elders themselves make offerings when they first get together, even before Mount Sinai.
So hopefully we'll listen very carefully this Shabbat as the Torah is read, and we see the sound of the shofar.
Yes, listen carefully and see the sounds. Rabbi, I want to wish you a very, very safe and successful trip to the United States.
Thank you,
and
Yitzchak.
looking forward already to your return. And so, folks, next week it'll be just me on Temple Talk. But as for this week, thanks for being with us, Temple Talk.